The medieval justice system featured a rather diverse array of options. These 10 methods of persuasion range from the utterly basic to the surprisingly intricate, demonstrating that history's most inventive concepts were not always its most benevolent ones. While modern courts might inundate you with legal documents, medieval courts preferred placing you upon the rack. Arguably history's least sought-after piece of exercise equipment, the dungeons of Europe housed a formidable collection of contraptions intended to compel confessions from reluctant individuals, but the rack distinguished itself as the medieval equivalent of a profoundly unpleasant chiropractic appointment. The rack was essentially a wooden framework that appeared deceptively simple at first glance, much like those easy-to-assemble furniture items, except this one came fully constructed and infused with a generous measure of suffering. At its core lay a substantial rectangular frame fitted with rollers at either end, interconnected by heavy-duty ropes. A crank mechanism attached to these rollers would slowly turn, pulling the victim's limbs in opposing directions. The torturers referred to it as an examination table, a designation that arguably should have sparked history's inaugural false advertising lawsuit. The device gained its reputation through its systematic method of inflicting agony. Unlike the rapid terror of the gallows or the swift blow of the executioner's axe, the rack was designed to take its time. Medieval torture's answer to slow cooking, except the only thing being tenderized was the prisoner. The victim would be securely fastened to the frame, their wrists and ankles bound by sturdy ropes or iron shackles. Then commenced what the torturers euphemistically termed the questioning, medieval Europe's longest-running Q&A session, where every incorrect answer resulted in an additional inch of height. The procedure began gradually, with the crank turning just enough to induce uncomfortable tension in the victim's joints. As the interrogation persisted, this tension would steadily increase. The human body possesses remarkable flexibility, but the rack pushed well beyond its natural limits, resembling a yoga session gone horribly wrong. The initial sound was the popping of shoulders, an echo that resonated through the stone chambers. If the victim still refused to confess, the cranking continued, progressing to elbows, knees, and finally the hips, a full-body workout that would make modern fitness enthusiasts reconsider their pursuits. Here is a fascinating, albeit somewhat unsettling fact. Individuals subjected to the rack could increase their height by up to 6 inches during this session. This effectively made it medieval Europe's first height enhancement program, though curiously, it never gained popularity among the nobility. Perhaps it was the adverse effects, dislocated joints, torn ligaments, and damage to internal organs, the kind of side effects not typically listed on medicine warning labels. Those who survived rarely regained the ability to walk, rendering it the world's initial permanent disability program with a 100% acceptance rate. The rack was not solely about physical agony, it was a masterclass in psychological torment. The slow, deliberate nature of the process afforded victims ample time to contemplate their fate, making it the medieval equivalent of waiting at the DMV, albeit considerably more painful. The creaking of the wooden frame, the clicking of the crank mechanism, a discordant symphony of suffering that made the local town crier sound like a gospel choir. The device became so notorious that its mere presence in a torture chamber was frequently enough to elicit confessions. The Tower of London's rack was particularly feared, earning the kind of negative reputation that persists today. Some prisoners confessed to whatever they were accused of simply upon seeing the apparatus. Medieval history's earliest example of look-no-touch persuasion techniques. Each region of Europe developed its own variations of the rack in what might be described as the worst international trade exhibition ever conceived. The Spanish added supplementary ropes, apparently deeming standard stretching insufficiently uncomfortable. The French devised a more precise cranking mechanism, importing their reputation for culinary refinement into the realm of torture. German engineers, never to be outdone in matters of efficiency, incorporated reinforced rollers, operating under the principle that if one intends to break a person, it should be accomplished with superior engineering. The device's efficacy in extracting confessions made it a favorite among medieval authorities who firmly believed that pain was the pathway to truth. An early iteration of no pain, no gain that profoundly missed the intended sentiment. Documents are filled with confessions obtained on the rack, though contemporary historians note that many of these confessions were likely false. It turns out people will admit to almost anything to avoid being stretched like taffy, including claiming a past life as a dragon. Speaking of pain and truth, while the rack was brutal in its application, it was but one instrument in medieval Europe's extensive arsenal of judicial persuasion. The device itself, however, demonstrated considerable ingenuity in its approach to human suffering. Structurally, it resembled a metallic embrace gone terribly awry. The apparatus consisted of a metal A-frame with constricting bands that would force the victim into a crouching posture. The prisoner's head would be forced towards their knees while their arms were wrapped around their legs. If you are attempting this position now, refrain. Your health insurance likely does not cover medieval torture reenactments. The true horror commenced when the torturer began tightening the screws. As the metal bands tightened, the victim was slowly compressed into an increasingly smaller sphere. The process would continue until blood seeped from the victim's nose, ears, and fingertips, a gruesome side effect not typically included in medieval wellness brochures. One particularly unpleasant aspect of the scavenger's daughter was its efficiency in causing maximum discomfort within minimal space. While the rack required an entire room and several operators, this device could inflict unbearable agony in a space no larger than a modern office chair. It was, in a chillingly literal sense, medieval torture's answer to downsizing. The Tower of London, ever the trendsetter in medieval torture implements, kept its scavenger's daughter in regular use. In 1580, records mention a prisoner named Thomas Cudden who received an unwelcome demonstration of the device. The notes describe him being bent and crushed so severely that for 2 weeks afterward, he was unable to walk upright and his arms and legs were incapacitated. Being compressed into a ball triggered intense claustrophobia, making every breath a struggle. Prisoners would feel their own heartbeat pounding against their knees, establishing a rhythmic countdown to their next confession. Some survivors reported that the sensation of being crushed lingered long after their release. Medieval Europe's first documented cases of compression-related PTSD. Henry VIII, not content with merely revolutionizing English marriage customs, took particular pride in this addition to his torture arsenal. The device gained such notoriety that it became known as one of the three sisters of torture at the Tower of London, alongside the rack and a third device we will discuss later. These three earned their collective nickname due to their notable effectiveness in extracting confessions, though they likely wouldn't have been featured in any family portrait. The scavenger's daughter proved especially popular during the religious conflicts of the 16th century. Catholic priests found practicing their faith often became intimately acquainted with the device. One priest wrote that the experience was like being folded into a pocket prayer book, though one doubts this was his preferred form of religious devotion. Perhaps the most ironic aspect of the scavenger's daughter was its function as a space-saving alternative to the rack. When dungeon space was limited, torturers could efficiently process their victims without requiring elaborate equipment. It was medieval efficiency at its finest, though probably not the type of innovation featured in promotional materials for the English Renaissance. The device's reputation for effectiveness stemmed from its ability to cause intense pain without leaving obvious external signs, perfect for situations where a prisoner needed to appear presentable for court the next day. Internal damage, however, was often severe and long-lasting. Survivors frequently suffered from chronic joint pain, spinal issues, and breathing difficulties. A medieval souvenir package nobody requested. While the scavenger's daughter favored a more compact approach to torture than its predecessor, the rack, the Iron Maiden, represents a medieval torturer's attempt at multitasking. Known in Germany as the Eiserne Jungfrau, this device has become the iconic image of medieval torture, appearing in everything from horror films to heavy metal album covers. The traditional narrative describes the Iron Maiden as a human-shaped cabinet with a rather inhospitable internal design. It featured dozens of sharp iron spikes strategically placed to pierce the victim without hitting any vital organs. The most renowned Iron Maiden reportedly resided in Nuremberg and dated to the 1500s. Standing about 7 feet tall, it featured a hinged front that opened like the world's most terrifying armoire. The exterior was crafted to resemble a woman's face, often depicted with a tranquil expression that starkly contrasted with the events unfolding inside. Medieval irony at its peak. The internal spikes were arranged with malevolent precision, When the doors were closed, they would pierce the victim's eyes, chest, and various other body parts, but deliberately avoided major arteries and organs. This ensured the unfortunate occupant could survive for a considerable duration, though they were unlikely to compose any positive reviews about the experience. Some versions even included a spike positioned perfectly to pierce the victim's voice box, preventing their screams from disturbing anyone's medieval afternoon tea. The Nuremberg Iron Maiden became such a popular attraction that other cities began commissioning their own versions. It was medieval Europe's first franchise operation, though likely not the type that would attract modern investors. These replicas varied in design and quality, from elaborately decorated pieces to what were essentially metal boxes with spikes, the medieval equivalent of knockoff designer goods. During the 19th century, the Iron Maiden became a staple of traveling torture museum exhibitions. Victorian audiences paid good money to view these devices, proving that morbid curiosity has remained a constant over the centuries. The original Nuremberg Iron Maiden was tragically destroyed during World War II, taking its secrets to the grave, though likely fewer secrets than its supposed victims. Whether the Iron Maiden was a genuine medieval device or a later invention designed to capitalize on public fascination with torture, its impact on our understanding of medieval justice is undeniable. Speaking of agony, our next device was terrifyingly real, and it possessed a unique talent for compelling confessions. In medieval times, even fruit names were not safe from being repurposed by torture device designers. The pear of anguish earned its botanical moniker from its shape, though this particular pear would never grace anyone's fruit bowl. Approximately the size of an actual pear, this mechanical device packed more terror per square inch than almost any other torture instrument of its era. The basic design reflected medieval engineering at its most diabolical, a metal body divided into 4 segments connected by a screw mechanism that, when turned, would slowly force the segments apart. The surface of each segment featured ridges and spikes that would tear into flesh as the device expanded. Most recovered specimens measure around 6 inches long when fully closed, though they could expand to roughly triple that size. What made the pear particularly terrifying was its adaptability. Unlike the massive immobile devices that filled medieval torture chambers, this compact instrument could be deployed anywhere. Interrogations were conducted in locations ranging from damp prison cells to private merchant homes, noble estates, and even monastery grounds. A grim account from 1467 describes a mobile inquisitor who carried 3 different pairs in a specialized leather case, traveling between villages in southern France. Each pair was crafted for specific types of crimes. The oral variant, featuring smaller, more densely packed spikes, targeted heretics and blasphemers. The rectal version, with its broader expansion range, was reserved for homosexuals and those accused of witchcraft. A third variant, with particularly sharp ridges, was designed for women accused of consorting with demons or committing adultery. Medieval justice had developed an uncomfortably specific set of tools for its trade. The device's mechanism showcased medieval craftsmen's disturbing attention to detail. The ratcheting system employed precisely engineered teeth that prevented any accidental closure, a safety feature ensuring only the torturer could control the device's expansion. Some recovered specimens show evidence of different expansion speeds, with certain mechanisms designed to operate more slowly than others, allowing torturers to fine-tune the duration of suffering. Recovered court documents from the Spanish Inquisition reveal the device's central role in extracting confessions. A ledger from Toledo dated 1513 lists detailed success rates for different torture methods. The pair ranked particularly high, with notes praising its efficiency at breaking both physical and spiritual resistance. The same ledger includes a disturbing inventory system for tracking the wear and tear on different pairs, complete with schedules for replacement and repair. The construction of these devices required remarkable skill. Master craftsmen would spend weeks perfecting the expansion mechanism, ensuring smooth operation and maximum durability. A guild document from Milan describes the specific metallurgical techniques used to prevent rust and maintain sharp edges. The same document mentions an apprenticeship system specifically for torture device maintenance, with the pair requiring the most specialized training. Regional variations emerged across Europe. German pairs were known for their robust construction and efficient mechanisms, French versions often featured more elaborate decorative elements, while Spanish models emphasized maximum expansion capability. Italian craftsmen developed a unique variant that could be heated before use, adding thermal torture to its capabilities. Each region seemed determined to put its own twisted stamp on the device's design. Two rival torture device makers fought over patent rights to a new pair design, taking their case before the city council. The dispute ended when both craftsmen were arrested for publicly revealing trade secrets in open court. Medieval intellectual property law apparently drew the line at discussing torture techniques in public sessions. Archaeological findings have revealed surprising details about the device's evolution. Early versions from the 14th century were relatively crude, with simple two-part expansion mechanisms. By the 15th century, craftsmen had developed the four-segment design, allowing for more controlled and extensive damage. Some late medieval versions even included replaceable segment plates, allowing torturers to switch between different spike patterns. The device's reputation spawned a peculiar black market. Wealthy sadists would commission private collections, often with customized features. One recovered specimen from a French nobleman's estate featured perfumed wood handles and gem-encrusted turning mechanisms. Another, found in an Italian palazzo, came with a matched set of silk maintenance cloths and aromatic oils, because apparently even torture devices needed to adhere to certain aristocratic standards of refinement. Stories circulated of devices that could sense guilt, expanding faster for the truly wicked. While the pair of anguish demonstrated medieval ingenuity in creating intimate instruments of suffering, our next device took torture in a more theatrical direction. Public executions in medieval Europe were essentially the original reality shows, and the Catherine wheel was the star performer. Named after Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who purportedly survived an attempt to execute her on a spiked wheel. Spoiler, she survived the backup execution method. This device transformed death into a prolonged art form that could last for hours. The wheel itself was a feat of medieval engineering gone horribly wrong. Typically measuring 6 to 8 feet in diameter, it was constructed of solid oak or ash wood, reinforced with iron bands. Sharp spikes or blades were attached around the rim and across the spokes, carefully positioned to break bones without causing immediate death. The wheel would be mounted on a sturdy pole, allowing it to be raised high enough for the entire crowd to witness the spectacle, medieval Europe's twisted version of dinner theater. In 1348, the first documented use of the Catherine wheel occurred in Germany. The executioner's report describes with disturbing precision how the condemned was tied to the wheel's rim, with their limbs woven through the spokes. The true artistry lay in the breaking process. Executioners would systematically shatter the victim's limbs using an iron bar, starting with the legs and working upwards. They meticulously avoided vital organs to ensure the victim remained conscious for the main event. Professional executioners developed their own signature techniques. Some preferred breaking limbs from bottom to top, while others worked in a specific pattern they claimed maximized suffering. A notorious executioner from Bavaria guarded knowledge about his methods, including the optimal spacing between blows and the best angles for breaking different bones. Condemned prisoners were afforded a front-row seat to observe the wheel being assembled and tested. Some executioners would make a show of sharpening their iron bars and adjusting the spikes, adding theatrical flourishes to heighten anticipation. There's an executioner who would name each spike after a different saint, asking his victim which one they would like to meet first. Unlike other torture devices offering privacy, the Catherine wheel was centered around the audience experience. Executions were often scheduled for market days to ensure maximum attendance. Vendors would sell snacks and drinks, transforming execution days into macabre festivals. Some towns even constructed permanent wheel platforms with designated viewing areas. Medieval Europe's first attempt at stadium seating. A peculiar tradition developed around the wheel's construction. Wheelwrights considered it an honor to be commissioned for execution wheels, often adding special touches like decorative carving or painted religious symbols. One preserved wheel from 1473 features intricately carved biblical scenes between the spikes, because nothing quite says divine justice like artisanal torture devices. Weather conditions could affect the performance. Rain might cause the wood to swell, altering breaking angles, while sunny days risked victims dying of thirst before the main spectacle concluded. Execution schedules often included backup dates for inclement weather. Some records show executions being postponed because the weather wasn't sufficiently miserable to satisfy the judge's sentence. The wheel's efficiency at prolonging death made it a preferred method for particularly heinous crimes. Evidence from France shows that a strong criminal could survive up to 3 days on the wheel, providing extended entertainment for the bloodthirsty crowds. Town councils would post guards to prevent sympathetic onlookers from providing water to the condemned or attempting mercy killings. Apparently, medieval justice insisted on full-length performances. One of the wheel's most infamous moments occurred during a mass execution in 1581, when 6 wheels were operated simultaneously. The executioners turned it into a competition, betting on whose victim would endure the longest. The event attracted such large crowds that the viewing platform collapsed, injuring dozens of spectators. The town council's response? To build a stronger platform, rather than reconsider their entertainment choices. Maintenance logs reveal the disturbing economics of wheel executions. Each wheel could be used for multiple executions if properly maintained. Though the spikes required regular replacement, some towns had annual contracts with blacksmiths for spike replacement and wheel maintenance. One particularly frugal town council insisted on recycling old spikes into nails for public buildings, a medieval attempt at sustainability nobody requested. While the Catherine wheel transformed torture into a public spectacle, the next method of medieval justice would demonstrate that true horror often came with terrifying simplicity. While most torture devices relied on metal, wood, or rope to inflict suffering, flaying took a more minimalist approach. All it required was a sharp knife and expertise in human anatomy. This method of separating someone from their skin predated medieval times. In 1384, details emerged about the tools required for a proper flaying: an assortment of specially curved knives, hooks for gripping loose skin, and needles of various sizes. The knives needed to be razor sharp but not too thin. Durability was crucial when removing nature's largest organ. Some executioners even developed their own custom tools, though these likely wouldn't have been featured at any medieval craft fair. The process commenced with meticulous preparation. Victims were thoroughly washed and shaved. Medieval torturers understood basic hygiene when it served their objectives. The most skilled practitioners could remove the entire skin in one piece, starting from the feet and working upwards. Professional flayers developed their own specialties. Some preferred commencing with the hands and face, believing this maximized psychological trauma. Others took pride in their ability to keep victims conscious throughout the procedure, a skill that probably wouldn't have earned them a spot in any medieval guild's annual achievement awards. One meticulous executioner from Florence documented information about optimal cutting angles and skin tension. Medieval science at its most gruesome. Victims would often be positioned facing mirrors, compelled to watch their own transformation. Some executioners engaged in casual conversation during the process, discussing the weather or local gossip while systematically removing their victim's outer layer. Temperature control within chambers could significantly impact the process. Cold conditions cause skin to contract, making removal more difficult, while excessive heat risks the victim passing out too quickly. Some torture chambers installed primitive climate control systems, essentially braziers and water barrels, to maintain optimal flaying conditions. Medieval comfort control had strange priorities. The procedure gained such notoriety that it generated its own specialized vocabulary. Different regions developed unique terms for various flaying techniques. The French had specific words for removing facial skin in one piece, while German executioners created compound terms describing particular patterns of removal. Medieval linguistics took some dark turns. Professionally removed human skin held value in certain markets, particularly for binding books. One accounting ledger lists materials recovered from judicial proceedings as a source of income. The Venetian bureaucracy's talent for euphemism apparently extended to their torture-related revenue streams. The longevity record for survival during flaying remains a subject of medieval debate. While most victims died from shock or blood loss within hours, records claim some survived for days. There's an account of a victim who lasted for 3 days, though historians suspect this might have been an exaggeration intended to impress visiting dignitaries. Medieval administrative reports apparently needed embellishment. Scholarly texts of the period contain detailed anatomical studies based on flaying observations. One medical manuscript includes drawings of skin layers and nerve endings, knowledge gained through the darkest kind of research. Medieval medicine sometimes advanced through profoundly unethical means. Flaying earned its reputation as one of the most dreaded punishments in the medieval justice system. While other torture methods relied on sophisticated devices, flaying served as a stark reminder that sometimes the simplest methods could be the most terrifying. Speaking of terrifying simplicity, our next device proved that when it came to torture, sometimes the most effective tools were not devices at all. Execution by boiling distinguished itself as medieval justice's contribution to culinary horror. Unlike other methods requiring complex machinery or skilled torturers, this technique needed little more than a large cauldron, a heat source, and sufficient liquid to fill it. The method's simplicity made it disturbingly popular across Europe, particularly for crimes involving poison or food tampering, a twisted form of poetic justice. The legal framework for boiling executions was officially recognized in England through a 1531 Act of Parliament. This law specifically designated boiling as the prescribed punishment for poisoners, making England the first kingdom to formally regulate human cooking temperatures. The act remained in effect until 1547, though the practice continued unofficially in various regions for decades afterward. The law's meticulous detail included specifications for cauldron size and even the type of wood to be used for fuel. The logistics of boiling executions proved surprisingly complex. The cauldron needed to be large enough to completely submerge an adult, typically holding between 100 to 150 gallons of liquid. Some regions used water, while others preferred oil or even molten lead for particularly severe cases. Heating such volumes required significant amounts of fuel, leading some cities to establish special forest reserves specifically for execution fuel, marking certain trees as justice wood. Professional executioners developed specialized techniques based on the crime. Poisoners often faced slow immersion in gradually heated water, a prolonged process that could last hours. Thieves and murderers typically endured immediate submersion in already boiling liquid, considered a more merciful approach. Details also exist on how certain crimes warranted specific liquids: oil for arsonists, salt water for pirates, and beer for those who committed crimes while intoxicated. Cities competed to develop the most efficient execution sites. Venice created a dedicated boiling chamber with innovative ventilation systems that prevented steam from obstructing the executioner's visibility. Paris installed a sophisticated pulley system capable of raising and lowering victims with precise control. London's Newgate prison boasted a graduated cauldron with internal platforms, allowing partial immersion for lesser crimes. Cultural attitudes toward boiling executions varied across Europe. Mediterranean regions viewed it as particularly appropriate for maritime crimes, while Northern European countries reserved it primarily for domestic offenses. Eastern European courts rarely used boiling, considering it a wasteful use of fuel resources, except in cases involving food-related crimes. The practice had eventually declined, not due to humanitarian concerns, but practical ones. The high fuel costs, complexity of proper temperature control, and maintenance requirements made it increasingly impractical. As cities grew larger and execution rates increased, most regions had shifted to more efficient methods of capital punishment by the late 16th century, though the threat of boiling remained in legal codes for decades afterward. While boiling alive demonstrated the medieval talent for transforming ordinary objects into instruments of death, our next device proved that true terror often came in small packages. The heretic's fork demonstrated that when it came to torture devices, size was irrelevant. This small but effective tool consisted of a simple two-sided fork, each end tipped with sharp prongs. What it lacked in complexity, it compensated for in psychological torment, transforming basic human needs, rest and speech, into instruments of suffering. The device's design showcased medieval simplicity at its most sinister. One end of the fork pressed under the victim's chin, while the other dug into their sternum. A leather strap around the neck held it firmly in place. The positioning forced victims to keep their heads tilted up and back, a posture that became agonizing within hours. Any attempt to lower the chin drove the prongs deeper into the flesh. Law records from the Spanish Inquisition reveal precise specifications for these devices. The optimal length measured exactly 8 inches, with prongs sharp enough to pierce skin, but not deep enough to cause fatal wounds. There was a master craftsman's commission for 50 forks with explicit instructions regarding prong tip angles. Sleeping became impossible while wearing the fork. Victims had to maintain constant muscle tension to prevent the prongs from piercing their flesh. There's a record of a prisoner who endured 3 days before exhaustion caused them to drop their head, driving the prongs deep enough to necessitate medical attention. The attending physician's notes contain the remarkably understated observation that patients show signs of sleep deprivation. Torturers would demonstrate its effects on mannequins or, more grimly, on corpses. One particularly theatrical interrogator developed a routine of repeatedly dropping the fork, forcing prisoners to watch it clatter against the stone floor while contemplating their fate. Different regions developed specialized variants. French models featured slightly curved prongs, claimed to increase discomfort without increasing injury risk. German craftsmen added small weights to the center, making the device harder to balance. Spanish versions often included religious inscriptions on the handle, presumably for those moments when victims required spiritual guidance about their predicament. The fork's role in interrogations followed a precise protocol. Questions were asked slowly and deliberately, with interrogators often sitting just outside the victim's limited field of vision. Unable to nod or shake their head normally, prisoners had to develop new ways to indicate yes or no. There's a record of a prisoner who blinked once for yes and twice for no. Medieval innovation born of necessity. Maintenance logs reveal surprising attention to detail. Prongs required regular sharpening, but not too sharp. A delicate balance between discomfort and danger. One custodian reported his detailed notes about rust prevention, including a special oil mixture he developed specifically for fork maintenance. His formula remains a mystery, though given its purpose, perhaps that's for the best. The fork gained particular favor among prison wardens for its ability to prevent communication between prisoners. Unable to lower their heads or speak clearly, inmates couldn't easily plot escapes or share information. Professional torturers developed techniques for maximizing the fork's effectiveness. Some would place prisoners facing mirrors, compelling them to watch their own struggle against gravity. Others developed precise schedules for tightening and loosening the neck strap, creating a false sense of relief before returning to full tension. An innovative torturer installed small bells that would ring if the victim's head dropped too low. The device's economics proved remarkably efficient. Unlike complex machines requiring regular maintenance and replacement parts, the fork's simplicity made it cost-effective. Treasury records from various prisons show them lasting years with minimal upkeep. One particularly frugal facility proudly reported using the same set of forks for over a decade, though they did note increasing complaints about rust. Time itself became the true torturer with the heretic's fork. Hours stretched into days as victims fought against their own exhaustion. While the heretic's fork relied on the precision of skilled craftsmen, our next method demonstrated that medieval torturers could transform ordinary things into instruments of extraordinary terror. Rat torture stood out for its resourcefulness. After all, what better way to reduce prison costs than to allow your torture devices to feed themselves? The method turned one of humanity's oldest nemeses into an unwitting accomplice in the art of extracting confessions. Official documents reveal surprisingly specific protocols for selecting the appropriate rats. Young, hungry specimens were preferred, with information detailing payments to professional rat catchers who specialized in providing specimens of suitable vigor. One torturer reported on the effectiveness of different rat breeds, noting that Norwegian rats exhibited superior determination in their work. Some facilities even maintained breeding programs to develop more aggressive strains. The basic setup required minimal equipment: a cage, a few rats, and a heat source. The cage would be placed on the victim's body, usually the stomach or chest, then gradually heated from above. The rats, seeking to escape the rising temperature, would begin to burrow in the only direction available: straight into the victim's flesh. Medieval efficiency experts would have approved of this self-motivated torture system. The true artistry lay in controlling the heating process to ensure maximum effect without inadvertently cooking the rats. One facility maintained detailed inventories of their animal assets, including feeding schedules and replacement rates. There's a quartermaster's formal request for more robust cages after several rats escaped, causing what he diplomatically described as administrative inconvenience among the staff. The same request reveals a complex food chain management system designed to keep the rats at optimal hunger levels. Spanish inquisitors preferred using multiple smaller cages rather than one large one, claiming this allowed for more targeted interrogation. German practitioners developed specialized cage heating systems with temperature controls, leading one administrator to complain about unnecessary innovations in rat management. French torturers added aromatic herbs to the cages, supposedly to encourage directional burrowing. Medieval torture's attempt at aromatherapy. Italian interrogators experimented with different cage materials, eventually settling on a copper-iron alloy that provided optimal heat distribution. Simply producing the rat cage could induce confessions from prisoners who had heard tales of the procedure. An interrogator proudly stated that his facility maintained a demonstration rat, presumably for promotional purposes. He also included expense claims for keeping this rat pleasantly plump and visually intimidating. Some facilities even developed elaborate pre-torture demonstrations involving wooden dummies and trained rats. Training staff to handle the rat-based torture system required specialized knowledge. A surviving instruction manual lists essential skills, including proper rat motivation techniques and cage temperature optimization. One section specifically warns against naming the rats, suggesting some torturers had developed unfortunate attachments to their tiny assistants. The manual also includes troubleshooting guides for common problems, like insufficient burrowing enthusiasm and premature rat exhaustion. The economics of rat torture proved surprisingly complex. While the rats themselves were cheap or free, maintaining proper cages and heating equipment required regular investment. Quality control presented unique challenges. Rats needed to be replaced regularly as they became less effective once well fed. One facility developed a rotation system, complete with rest periods for their rodent workforce. The procedure's reputation spread far beyond its actual use. Rumors circulated about specialized rat training facilities and secret breeding programs for more efficient torture rats. While these stories were mostly fictional, they contributed to the psychological impact. Some regions even developed elaborate mythologies around particularly successful rats, attributing them with almost supernatural abilities. Professional rivalry emerged between practitioners of different torture methods. Internal memos revealed debates about the relative merits of rat-based versus mechanical torture. There's a torturer's defensive letter to his superior insisting that rat-based interrogation requires as much skill as any mechanical device, suggesting medieval workplace politics could be surprisingly specific. The letter goes on to propose a formal certification program for rat torture specialists. The device's operation followed a precise protocol. Victims would be suspended above the pyramid by ropes, then gradually lowered until their body weight rested on the point. Guards controlled the victim's descent speed using a sophisticated pulley system. A meticulous facility keeper's logbook correlated descent velocities with confession rates, creating medieval torture's first efficiency study. Height adjustment mechanisms underwent continuous refinement. Early models used simple rope and pulley systems, but later versions incorporated geared winches for more precise control. The name itself referenced the biblical betrayer Judas, though even he might have questioned this particular method of punishment. Records from 1478 revealed exacting specifications for constructing a proper Judas cradle. The pyramid required precise 60-degree angles, crafted from hardwood or metal, with a point sharp enough to cause maximum discomfort without immediate penetration. Regional variations emerged across Europe. Spanish models featured slightly curved pyramids, claimed to increase discomfort without accelerating tissue damage. German engineers developed a swiveling base that added rotational movement to the experience. French craftsmen created ornately decorated versions, proving that even torture devices couldn't escape artistic sensibilities. A surviving example features intricate carvings of demons around its base, medieval interior decoration at its darkest. Cold dungeons could cause the metal to contract, while summer heat expanded it. Some facilities installed primitive climate control systems using braziers and water barrels. A quartermaster's inventory lists seasonal pyramid adjustments as a regular maintenance task, suggesting medieval torturers understood thermal expansion before physicists gave it a name. Professional torturers developed specialized techniques for maximizing the cradle's effectiveness. Some would add weights to the victim's ankles, while others preferred psychological methods like placing mirrors to force victims to watch their own ordeal. One manual suggests maintaining casual conversations with victims about their families while adjusting the height. Medieval multitasking at its worst. The device's reputation spawned its own vocabulary. Different facilities developed unique terms for various positions and techniques. The French created specific words for different stages of a descent, while German records show compound terms describing victim reactions. There's one glossary that includes terms for various sitting postures, suggesting medieval torturers might have moonlighted as uncomfortable furniture designers. Quality control presented unique challenges. Regular point maintenance was essential, too sharp, and the torture ended too quickly. Too dull, and it lost effectiveness. One record includes weekly point inspection reports, complete with standardized testing procedures. The same documents reveal an ongoing dispute about proper pyramid polishing techniques, suggesting medieval workplace debates could become surprisingly specific. Victims were compelled to use their own muscle strength to slightly raise themselves off the point, fighting against exhaustion and gravity. The moment their strength failed, they would descend. Some facilities installed counting systems to track how long victims could maintain elevation, turning torture into a gruesome endurance sport. While initial construction costs were high, the device's durability made it a sound long-term investment. One Treasury document lists a cradle's expected service life at 15 years, assuming regular maintenance and point replacement. The same record includes depreciation calculations that would impress modern accountants. The device's design influenced medieval furniture, making it in unexpected ways. Several chair designs from the period show similar triangular supports, though hopefully with less sinister intent. One furniture makers guild actually banned pyramid-shaped seats entirely, possibly to avoid unfortunate associations. Their regulations specifically mention avoiding any resemblance to instruments of justice. Perhaps the most chilling aspect isn't the devices themselves, but how their creators approach torture with the same dedication others might bring to crafting furniture or brewing ale.